People look at me now, Avery Vance, fancy clothes, penthouse view over Lake Michigan, and they think I was born sipping champagne. They see the name Lexington Grand Hotels stamped on buildings from Miami to Seattle, and they figure I just inherited the whole thing. But let me tell you something. I remember sleeping in my car when I was 22, just trying to save enough for community college tuition. I remember the bitter cold of a Minnesota winter when the heater was broken, and I was using old newspapers as a blanket. That memory? That's my compass. It's why I started my hotel chain with one simple, non-negotiable rule. Treat every single person who walks through that door like they are the most important person in the world. Whether they're wearing a tailored Italian suit or clothes held together with duct tape. We built an empire on that rule. But lately, I had started getting this nagging feeling. A chill. I was hearing whispers, small complaints that never made it into the official reports. Things like, the staff was a little cold, or I felt rushed because I wasn't in the presidential suite. My flagship hotel, the original Lexington Grand right here in downtown Chicago, the absolute jewel of the whole operation, was where I suspected the rot was starting. It had become too successful, too opulent. I started to worry my staff had forgotten where we came from. They were serving billionaires every day, and maybe they'd started treating everyone else like a nuisance. I couldn't have that. The moment we lose our heart, we lose everything. I couldn't just send a mystery shopper in a nice suit. That wouldn't tell me anything. They needed to see how the staff reacted to someone who had absolutely nothing. Someone who looked like they shouldn't even be breathing the same filtered air as the guests. I decided I had to go in myself. And I had to go deep. My executive assistant, Mike, nearly had an aneurysm when I told him the plan. Mike is a good kid, sharp dresser, knows how to handle a hostile takeover. But this idea? This was completely off the rails for him. Avery, he pleaded, standing in my penthouse office, looking out at the city lights. You want to pretend to be homeless? In your own hotel? The risk, the optics, if anyone found out, no one is going to find out, Mike. I cut him off. You are the only person who knows. This isn't about optics. This is about truth. This is about checking the foundation of the entire company. If we fail this test, the whole thing is built on sand. It took 2 days to prepare. This wasn't just about putting on old clothes. It had to be convincing. If I just looked like a rich lady playing dress up, the staff would spot it instantly. They're trained to spot expensive watches from 50 feet away. I had my stylist, who, by the way, seriously considered resigning, use theatrical makeup. We worked on creating a truly authentic look of long-term neglect. Grime was worked under my fingernails and into the creases of my neck. My hair, normally perfectly blonde and sleek, was matted with a mixture of cheap hairspray and oil to make it look greasy and unwashed. We even darkened the skin around my eyes to suggest exhaustion and worry. For clothes, I drove an hour outside the city, wearing a baseball cap and dark glasses, and hit up a few thrift shops in a neighborhood where no one would recognize me. I bought the most stained, faded, and shapeless clothes I could find. A pair of jeans with holes in the knees that weren't stylish, just worn out. A massive, threadbare flannel shirt that smelled faintly of mildew and old coffee. And the coat was key. It was a bulky, faded brown parka that looked like it had been slept in for a year, which it probably had. The morning of the test, I looked in the mirror, and even I barely recognized myself. I looked tired, defeated, and frankly, a little scary. That was exactly the goal. Mike dropped me off 3 blocks from the Lexington Grand, exactly at 6 p.m. Rush hour was dying down, but the streets were still busy. He handed me a beat-up canvas bag, empty, just for show, and a bottle of water. "Remember the code word, Avery," he whispered, looking genuinely stressed. "If you run into trouble, just say Bluebird." "I won't need it, I assured him, my voice raspy from practicing a lower, less polished speaking tone. This is just a quick trip to the front desk. Walking those 3 blocks was an experience I hadn't had in 20 years. It was instant invisibility. People didn't just ignore me. They actively avoided me. A woman walking her poodle yanked the dog closer to her leg as I passed. A businessman talking on his cell phone stepped off the sidewalk and into the gutter rather than walk near me. I wasn't Avery Vance, CEO. I was just Refuse. Something to be stepped around. It was humbling. It was infuriating. And it solidified exactly why I was doing this. Finally, I reached the entrance of the Lexington Grand. Even from the street, the place just screamed wealth. The polished brass, the massive columns, the doorman in his pristine uniform, looking like he belonged on a London street corner. I approached the revolving door. The doorman, a tall, impeccably groomed man named Thomas, I knew all my senior staff by name, even the ones I rarely interacted with, saw me coming. His practiced, welcoming smile vanished. It was replaced by a rigid, wary look. He didn't open the door for me. He actually took a small, subtle step back, placing himself slightly between me and the entrance, a silent, human barrier. I pushed the revolving door myself and stepped inside the lobby. The shift in atmosphere was immediate and dizzying. 1 second I was in the cold, dirty street. The next, I was enveloped in warm air scented with lilies and expensive cleaning products. The lobby was exactly as I designed it. Marble floors that shone like black ice, deep velvet seating, and a massive crystal chandelier that probably cost more than my first 3 years of college tuition combined. It felt obscene, the contrast between the luxury surrounding me and the filth clinging to my coat. I shuffled deeper into the lobby. I could feel eyes on me, not curious, but judgmental. A couple sipping cocktails near the fireplace stopped talking and just stared. Another guest, checking his email on an enormous leather sofa, lifted his feet slightly as I walked past, as if worried I might contaminate the carpet. I ignored them all. My focus was the front desk. That was the heart. That was the test. The front desk area of the Lexington Grand is vast, built from dark, polished mahogany. There were 3 stations open. At the far end, a manager was arguing quietly with a guest about a bill. In the middle, a young man was cheerfully handing off a key card to a very elegant woman wearing diamonds that could pay my old rent for a decade. And at the first station, the one closest to me, was a young woman I recognized named Sarah. Sarah couldn't have been more than 24 or 25. She had a neat, professional ponytail, wore the standard navy blue Lexington Grand uniform jacket that was always perfectly pressed, and she was currently doing paperwork, her head bent down, focused. She looked tired, maybe, but professional. I watched her for a moment. She had that practiced, polite distance that all good receptionists develop, friendly but not overly familiar. I waited until the elegant woman was gone, and the young man in the middle station turned his attention to his computer screen. The desk was clear. I took a deep breath, trying to ignore the smell of my own coat, and shuffled forward. My shoes scraped slightly on the marble floor. The sound seemed deafening in the otherwise hushed lobby. Sarah didn't look up immediately. She finished scribbling something on a form. I stood there, leaning slightly on the counter, trying to look as non-threatening and desperate as possible. Finally, she lifted her head. Her eyes, which were a bright, clear blue, traveled up from the counter, over my stained, bulky coat, and finally rested on my face. The practiced smile she wore for guests immediately faltered. It didn't disappear completely, but it cracked. The polite distance was replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated caution. She didn't gasp or recoil, which was a point in her favor, but her shoulders tightened slightly. It was a subtle defensive posture. "Yes?" she asked. Her voice was low and professional, but it lacked the warm enthusiasm she had shown the previous guests. It was the tone you use when you think you might be about to call security. I decided to start with the most basic, pathetic request. I was testing compassion, not just policy. "Excuse me, ma'am," I mumbled, trying to make my voice sound raw and dry. I just need a little help." She kept her clear blue eyes fixed on me. "What kind of help are you looking for?" she asked. She didn't say, "We don't serve non-guests," or "You need to leave," which was good. But she also didn't invite me in. She was waiting for the inevitable request for money or a place to sleep. I leaned in a little closer, lowering my voice even more, exaggerating the exhaustion in my posture. "I need to know if you have a room," I whispered. "Just for tonight. A cheap one. The cheapest one you have." Now, this was the real test. The cheapest room at the Lexington Grand, even with a corporate discount, still costs more than most people's monthly rent. Her knowing that I looked like I couldn't afford a cup of coffee, let alone a $400 room, was the crux of the situation. Sarah blinked once, slowly. The tension in her shoulders eased ever so slightly, replaced by something that looked like confusion, maybe even pity. "A room," she repeated, her voice softening slightly, but still cautious. "Ma'am, the rates here at the Lexington Grand begin at $435 for a standard single. Do you have a reservation?" I shook my head slowly, sighing dramatically. "No. No reservation. I got lost. I didn't realize how late it was getting. I just need a warm place to sleep tonight, out of the wind. I have a few dollars. Enough, maybe?" I patted the empty canvas bag dramatically. She looked at my bag, then back to my face. Her expression was complicated. She wasn't sneering, but she wasn't exactly rushing to help me either. She was stuck between professional duty and common sense. "I understand," she said slowly, "but I need to be honest with you. Even if we had a lower rate, we require a major credit card for incidentals at check-in and the full payment up front." She paused, then lowered her voice, leaning slightly over the counter, clearly trying to keep the conversation private from the surrounding guests, who were definitely watching now. "Look, I can't check you in without proper identification and payment. And frankly, ma'am, I would be required to call security if you linger in the lobby. This is a private establishment for paying guests." Ouch. There it was. The inevitable dismissal. It was polite but firm. She had maintained professional decorum, but she was pushing me out the door. It was exactly the kind of cold, corporate response I was afraid of. I was about to stand up straight, drop the act, and tell her exactly who I was when she did something that completely threw me off guard. She didn't reach for the phone to call security. She hesitated, looking troubled. She glanced quickly left, toward the manager who was still busy with a complaining guest, and then she leaned in even closer to me. "Listen," she whispered, her blue eyes wide. "I can't give you a room here. I can't even get you into the employee break room. But the weather is supposed to drop below freezing tonight." She reached beneath the counter, fumbling for a second. My heart started to beat faster. Was she grabbing her own wallet? Was she going to give me $10 to go away? No. She pulled out a small, crisp, white plastic bag, the kind you get from a high-end coffee shop. And she pushed it across the counter toward me, gently. "Take this," she murmured, still glancing nervously toward the manager. "It's the sandwich I brought for my dinner break. It's turkey and Swiss. And there's a bottle of water in there, too. It's not much, but it's food." I stared at the bag. It was a simple gesture, a small act of kindness, but it was done at the risk of her job. She wasn't following corporate policy. She wasn't calling security. She was seeing a person who was hungry and cold, and she was offering the only thing she had that wouldn't get her fired. I felt a genuine lump form in my throat. I had gone in expecting either total disdain or a call to security. I had not expected personal sacrifice. "Thank you," I managed to rasp out, taking the bag. The warmth of the food was palpable through the plastic. "Now you need to go," she urged, her voice low and quick. "The shelter downtown is about 4 blocks south, near the train station. It's warm there. Please, ma'am, go there." She didn't try to touch me or hurry me, but the urgency in her voice was real. She was genuinely concerned for my safety, not just her job. I nodded slowly, clutching the bag. "I will. Thank you, Sarah." I used her name deliberately. I wanted to see her reaction. Her eyes snapped wide open. The look of caution returned, mixed with confusion. "How did you know my name?" she whispered, her gaze scanning the name. Tag pinned perfectly to my massive, dirty coat. "You look like a Sarah," I lied weakly, still trying to keep the act going, but the shock of her kindness had cracked my composure. I turned and started shuffling toward the exit. The doorman, Thomas, was still standing guard, but this time, he looked slightly less hostile. He was watching me leave, probably relieved I hadn't made a scene. I pushed my way back out into the cold Chicago night. I walked 3 blocks before I stopped under a flickering street lamp. Mike was waiting down the street in the black town car, looking stressed. I pulled out my phone and sent him the single-word text. "Hold." I needed a moment. I leaned against a cold brick wall, pulling off the bulky hood of the parka. I stared at the little white bag Sarah had given me. She had pushed me away, yes, but she hadn't done it out of malice. She had done it because she was following the rules of a luxury establishment that could not host me, but she had mitigated that cruelty with a gesture that came straight from her own pocket. She had seen my need and responded personally. That was the heart I thought we had lost. I took the sandwich out of the bag. It was a good sandwich, turkey and Swiss on whole wheat, wrapped neatly in wax paper. And tucked right next to the water bottle, I noticed something else. It was a small, folded piece of paper, a napkin actually torn from a paper towel dispenser. I unfolded it carefully under the dim light of the street lamp. Sarah's handwriting was neat, slightly rounded, written in blue pen. It didn't say, "Good luck." It didn't say, "God bless." It said, "Asterisk, I'm sorry I couldn't help you with a room. I know it's hard. When I first moved here, I slept on a lot of couches. If you need a blanket or a pair of socks, I keep extras in my locker. Ask for me tomorrow night, after 7 p.m. Don't tell anyone." Asterisk. I stood there, the cold wind biting at my face, staring at that note. It was the deepest, most profound shock of the entire evening. It wasn't just a sandwich. It was an ongoing promise of help. An act that broke every single rule in our employee handbook about interacting with non-guests, and she was risking her job to do it just because she remembered what it was like to struggle. I crumpled the note slightly in my hand, feeling a sudden surge of emotion that had nothing to do with being cold or hungry. It was pride and relief. The Lexington Grand still had its heart. It was beating right there, behind the front desk, in the chest of a young receptionist named Sarah. I took a final deep breath, wiped the theatrical grime from my face with the back of my hand, and walked toward the waiting town car. Mike practically leaped out of the car when he saw me. "Avery, are you okay?" "You look..." "I'm fine, Mike," I said, climbing into the warmth of the back seat. "I'm absolutely fantastic." But the test wasn't over. Sarah had passed the compassion test with flying colors. Now, I needed to figure out what to do with that information. How do you reward that level of integrity and heart? And what would happen if I showed up the next day, not as the homeless wreck, but as the owner of the entire chain? I looked down at the bag again. I still had the sandwich. I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. And I knew exactly what I was going to do with Sarah. I just had to figure out how to make the next meeting the biggest shock of her life. And mine. I was fine, but Mike wasn't. The second I was in that plush leather seat, enveloped by the smell of expensive leather and the quiet hum of the engine, Mike started talking a mile a minute. Avery, thank God. I saw you walk out, and Thomas, the doorman, he was looking right at me, I swear. Did anyone recognize you? Did you use the code word? I was ready to drive through the lobby if I had to. I held up a hand, interrupting his panic attack. Mike, relax. I didn't need the code word. And no one recognized me. The disguise was flawless. I reached into the bag and pulled out the folded napkin, smoothing out the wrinkles. The note was still slightly warm from my hand. Look at this, I said, handing it to him. Mike took the note, his brow furrowed under the faint street lamp light filtering through the window. He read Sarah's neat, rounded script. Asterisk, I'm sorry I couldn't help you with a room. I know it's hard. When I first moved here, I slept on a lot of couches. If you need a blanket or a pair of socks, I keep extras in my locker. Ask for me tomorrow night, after 7 p.m. Don't tell anyone. Asterisk, he read it twice. The silence in the car was heavy, broken only by the distant sound of Chicago traffic. She offered you her own things? Mike finally whispered, sounding genuinely floored. From her locker? That's against every single security protocol, Avery. She's risking her job for a stranger. Exactly, I said, leaning back and letting out a long, slow breath. The tension of the last few hours finally started to drain away, replaced by a deep, satisfying warmth. She risked everything. She didn't call security. She didn't treat me like trash. She followed the rules of the hotel. She had to. She couldn't give me a room, but she broke the rules of the corporation to follow the rules of humanity. Mike looked at me, then back at the note. So, the foundation isn't built on sand after all. At least, not everywhere. No, Mike. The heart is still beating. It's just beating quietly in the background, in the employees who haven't forgotten what it's like to be cold. I picked up the sandwich bag again. I hadn't eaten it. I couldn't. It felt too sacred, too symbolic. I need you to do something for me, I instructed, my CEO voice snapping back into place, crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the raspy mumble I'd used an hour before. Tomorrow, you're going to run a deep background check on Sarah. Everything. Employment history, credit history, where she lives. I want to know her story, Mike. Every single detail. Mike, ever the professional, pulled out his tablet immediately. Understood. Privacy waiver. Tear down the walls, Mike. I need to know what she needs. Not what she wants. What she desperately needs. We drove back to my penthouse in silence, but my mind was racing. I spent the rest of the night scrubbing the grime and stage makeup off my skin, but the feeling of that cold, judgmental air in the lobby, that stuck. And the warmth of that small, white bag, that stuck even harder. I finally got into my own bed, which felt like a cloud made of money, but I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was Sarah, a young woman who, according to her own note, had slept on couches when she first moved to the city, and who was now willing to give up her dinner and her job. Security for someone who looked exactly like she had once been. The next morning, the report on Sarah Miller landed on my desk. Mike is efficient. I'll give him that. I sat there, sipping coffee that cost more per pound than Sarah probably spent on groceries in a week, and read her life story. Sarah Miller, age 24, grew up in a small town in rural Illinois. Moved to Chicago 3 years ago to study hospitality management at a state university, which she was currently doing part-time. She was working 2 jobs, the Lexington Grand front desk and a late-night shift at a diner near her apartment, just to cover tuition and rent. And the rent? She lived in a tiny, shared walk-up apartment in a neighborhood that wasn't dangerous, but definitely wasn't Lexington Grand adjacent. The credit report was the most telling. She wasn't swimming in debt, but she was constantly juggling bills. Her car, an ancient Honda Civic, had just broken down, and she was using the train and buses, which added 2 hours to her commute every day. She was living on the absolute edge, trying to claw her way up. She was me 20 years ago, just with a better education. This wasn't just about rewarding a good employee. This was about investing in the heart of my company and saving a good person from being crushed by the sheer weight of trying to make it in this city. I put the file down. A bonus check wasn't going to cut it. A raise wasn't enough. I needed to fundamentally change her trajectory, the way someone had changed mine years ago when they gave me that first, small loan that started everything. I called Mike back into the office. Forget the bonus, Mike. We're going bigger. I laid out the plan. Mike, who's used to handling multi-million-dollar deals, looked at me like I'd finally gone insane. A full-ride scholarship for her remaining university courses, paid for immediately, he confirmed, ticking off the list on his fingers. A new car, reliable, paid off. Absolutely, I confirmed. Something hybrid, excellent gas mileage. And Mike, she mentioned sleeping on couches when she first moved here. I want her to have stability. Find a small, safe apartment near the hotel. Pay the first 6 months' rent and the security deposit. Lease in her name, but we handle the initial overhead. Mike swallowed hard. Avery, this is a lot of capital for one receptionist who gave you a sandwich. No, Mike. I corrected him, my voice firm. This is the cheapest insurance policy I can buy for the integrity of a billion-dollar company. This is what happens when you prioritize people over profit. And besides, she didn't just give me a sandwich. She gave me hope. She showed me the company hasn't become what I feared. I paused. And one more thing. I want a promotion for her. Effective immediately. She is no longer just a receptionist. She's too valuable for that desk. I want her transferred to the corporate training and development department. She's going to teach every single new employee exactly how to treat people. Mike nodded slowly, starting to catch the vision. The Sarah Miller standard of service. Exactly. Now let's set up the meeting. The difficulty was arranging the reveal. I couldn't just barge into the lobby and announce I was the CEO. That would terrify her, make her think she was about to be fired for breaking the rules. I wanted this moment to be a pure, unadulterated positive shock. I needed to be there when she was on shift, but I needed privacy. I called the general manager of the Lexington Grand, a man named Robert, who was extremely dedicated, but maybe a little too focused on quarterly profits. Robert, Avery Vance here. I said, using my most commanding, no-nonsense tone. Robert sputtered slightly, clearly surprised to hear directly from the owner. Ms. Vance, to what do we owe the honor? I'm conducting a discreet, high-level review of employee morale and service excellence. I need to meet with a few staff members tonight. Privately. I'll be arriving around 7:15 p.m. Certainly, Ms. Vance. I'll clear the presidential suite conference room. No, I cut him off. I want a small, neutral office. And I only need 2 people present. You and one specific receptionist. Sarah Miller. She's working the evening shift. Robert paused, probably flipping through his mental employee roster. Sarah Miller? Yes, a good worker. But may I ask why Sarah specifically? Is there an issue? No issue at all, Robert. She's being considered for a corporate opportunity. Just tell her that I, Avery Vance, need to speak with her urgently about a personnel matter. Make it sound serious, but not alarming. And Robert, this is key. I want you to tell her to bring her personal belongings with her when she comes to the meeting. Everything she has in her locker. Robert sounded perplexed, but he knew better than to argue. Understood, Ms. Vance. I will have the small executive office on the 3rd floor ready, and Sarah Miller with her personal belongings at 7:15 p.m. The rest of the day was spent slipping back into the role of Avery Vance, CEO. I had my hair styled, put on a sharp navy blue suit, and wore the expensive diamond earrings Mike hates because he thinks they look too flashy. I needed to look like exactly what I was: power, success, and undeniable wealth. The contrast with the woman in the dirty parka had to be absolute. I even brought a prop. I put the turkey and Swiss sandwich, still wrapped in its wax paper, in a small, elegant cooler bag, tucked inside my designer handbag. At 7 p.m. that evening, I pulled up to the Lexington Grand. This time, Mike drove me right up to the front entrance. Thomas, the doorman, snapped to attention. His smile was dazzling, perfect, and completely genuine. He immediately opened the passenger door for me. Good evening, Ms. Vance. Welcome back to the Lexington Grand. He beamed, clearly recognizing the town car and my face. I looked at him. Thomas, you do a wonderful job. His chest puffed out slightly. Thank you, ma'am. I walked through the revolving door. The air was the same, scented with lilies and luxury. The marble floors gleamed. The guests were the same, opulent, aloof. But this time, they didn't avoid me. They watched me with respect, the kind of respect that money commands. I walked directly toward the front desk. Sarah wasn't there. The young man from the night before was handling a check-in. Robert, the general manager, spotted me instantly and rushed over, looking slightly sweaty in his tuxedo. Ms. Vance, everything is ready. The 3rd floor office is set up. I told Sarah Miller to report there at 7:15, and I made sure she understood it was a serious personnel matter. She looked a little nervous. Ma'am. I nodded, maintaining a stern expression. Good. That's exactly what I want. Where is she now? She's just finishing up on her break, ma'am. She should be heading up now. Excellent. Let's go, Robert. I want to be waiting for her. We took the private elevator up to the 3rd floor. The executive office Robert had chosen was small, with a large, dark mahogany desk dominating the room. There were 2 guest chairs facing the desk. I sat down behind the desk, positioning myself perfectly in the CEO spot. Robert stood nervously to my left. Robert, I said, glancing at my watch. When Sarah arrives, I want you to greet her, tell her to take a seat, and then I want you to leave the room immediately. This conversation is just between her and me. Robert looked alarmed. Leave the room? But, Ms. Vance, as the general manager, I should be present for any disciplinary action. It's not disciplinary, Robert, I said, leveling a steady gaze at him. It's confidential. I will call you when I am done. Yes, ma'am. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he folded under my gaze. At exactly 7:17 p.m., there was a soft knock on the door. Come in, I called out. The door opened, and Sarah stepped inside. She was wearing the same immaculate navy blue uniform, her ponytail was just as neat, and her face was scrubbed clean of any makeup. She was carrying a medium-sized canvas bag, the kind you carry a gym uniform in, and a small, beat-up plastic container, probably holding her dinner leftovers. She looked worried, the kind of deeply etched worry that only comes from knowing that any unexpected corporate meeting could mean the loss of your only lifeline. She looked at me, Avery Vance, in the expensive suit, diamonds catching the light, and she didn't recognize me. Not even a flicker of recognition. Why would she? The woman she had met the night before was trash, refuse. This woman was a titan. She looked at Robert, then back at me. Ms. Miller, please have a seat, Robert instructed, his voice stiff. Sarah sat down immediately in the chair closest to the desk, clutching her canvas bag to her chest. She looked like she was bracing for impact. Robert gave me a final, hesitant glance, and then, remembering my instructions, he quietly backed out of the room, closing the door behind him. We were alone. I let the silence hang there for a moment, just observing her. She was professional, poised despite her nerves. She was exactly the kind of person I wanted running the show. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. Sarah, I started, using a low, deliberate tone. Thank you for coming. I know you're busy. Not at all, Ms. Vance, she replied, her voice steady, though I could hear a slight tremor underneath. Mr. Roberts said you needed to discuss a personnel matter. Is everything all right? I nodded slowly, maintaining a serious expression.
No, Sarah.
Everything is not all right. There are some serious issues we need to discuss regarding your conduct last night. Sarah's face went pale. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting nervously around the room. I could see the exact moment she realized she was caught. Her shoulders slumped slightly. She knew exactly what I was talking about. The sandwich, the note, the breach of protocol. I understand, Ms. Vance, she whispered, her voice cracking slightly. I know I shouldn't have. I broke the rules. I apologize. It was so cold, and she looked so tired. She looked straight at me, and in her eyes, there was no defiance, only regret that she had been caught doing something kind. I asked, raising an eyebrow. The woman, Sarah clarified, her voice barely audible. The homeless woman who came to the desk asking for a room. I know the policy, Ms. Vance. I know we are supposed to call security immediately if a non-guest loiters. But I couldn't. I gave her my dinner. She took a shaky breath. I know that's grounds for immediate termination. I fully accept whatever decision you make, Ms. Vance. But I hope you understand that sometimes you just have to choose to be a person first. I kept my face perfectly neutral. I let the silence stretch out again, letting her fear simmer. It felt cruel, but I needed her to fully accept the consequences of her actions before I pulled the rug out from under her. You're right, Sarah, I said finally, my voice still cold and formal. You did break the rules. You offered aid to someone who was not a paying guest. You risked the security of the entire establishment. And you offered her a blanket and socks from your personal locker, inviting her back the next evening. Sarah closed her eyes for a brief second, resignation washing over her face. Yes, ma'am, I did. I leaned back in my chair, picking up a small, elegant cooler bag from the corner of the desk. I unzipped it and pulled out the small, white plastic bag containing the turkey and Swiss sandwich. I placed it gently on the mahogany desk, right between us. Sarah opened her eyes and stared at the sandwich. Her confusion was palpable. Do you recognize this, Sarah? I asked. She nodded slowly. That was my dinner. I agreed. And I have to say, it was a very good sandwich. Turkey and Swiss on whole wheat. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled paper towel napkin. I smoothed it out and placed it next to the sandwich. Sarah's eyes widened, finally connecting the dots. She looked at the sandwich, then at the note, then back up at my face, the face that was now clean, glamorous, and utterly recognizable. The color drained completely from her face. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She wasn't just shocked. She was terrified, like she was seeing a ghost. She recognized the eyes, the shape of the face, even though the expensive suit and perfect makeup were a world away from the grime and parka. You, she whispered, the word hanging in the air. You were her? I gave her a slow, small smile. I was Avery Vance, CEO of Lexington Grand Hotels. And last night, I was also just a person who was cold and needed a little help. The shock hit her like a physical wave. She didn't faint, but she gripped the arms of the chair so hard her knuckles turned white. Her perfect professional composure had shattered. "Ms. Vance," she stammered, scrambling for words. I had no idea. I am so sorry I treated you. You treated me exactly how you should treat everyone, Sarah." I cut her off gently, my voice now warm and clear. "You followed the hotel's rules, but you didn't let those rules make you cruel. You saw a human being in distress, and you responded with personal sacrifice." I leaned in again, folding my hands on the desk next to the sandwich and the note. "Sarah, I started this company 20 years ago with one rule. Treat every person who walks through that door like they're the most important person in the world. Lately, I've been worried we forgot that rule. I've been worried that serving billionaires every day turned us cold." I tapped the napkin gently. "This note, this sandwich, this proves me wrong. You, Sarah, are the heart of this company." She was still speechless, tears welling up in her clear blue eyes, but she wasn't crying out of fear anymore. It was pure, overwhelming relief and confusion. "So, here is where the personnel matter comes in, Sarah," I continued, my voice firm but kind. "You are absolutely right. You broke the rules. And in the Lexington Grand, when you break a rule that important, there are consequences." I paused for dramatic effect, making sure she was hanging on every word. "The consequence is this. You are being terminated from your position as a front desk receptionist, effective immediately." Sarah gasped, a small, choked sound escaping her lips. The tears spilled over. She had thought she was safe, and now the bottom had dropped out again. But I continued quickly, not letting her descend into panic. "You are being promoted to Director of Employee Training and Development, starting Monday morning." Her head snapped up. "What? Your new salary starts at triple your current pay, Sarah. Your job is to travel to every single Lexington Grand Hotel and teach every new employee the Sarah Miller standard of service. You will use that sandwich and you will use that note to teach them that compassion is not optional. It is the foundation of our business." I watched as the news slowly registered. The panic was replaced by disbelief, then dawning realization. "And that's not all," I said, pushing the background report Mike had compiled across the desk. "I know you're juggling school and struggling with rent and a broken car. That ends today. Your remaining university tuition is paid in full, and a brand new car is waiting for you in the employee garage downstairs. And effective today, you have a safe, fully paid for apartment lease near the hotel for the next 6 months." I watched her face crumble. She was crying now, openly, silently, the tears tracing paths through the professional facade she always maintained. "Ms. Vance, I can't accept all that," she choked out. "I just gave you a sandwich. You gave me back my faith, Sarah," I insisted. "And that is worth more than all the chandeliers in this building combined." I stood up, walking around the desk toward her. She instinctively tried to stand, but I waved her back down. "Now, about that canvas bag you brought," I said, nodding toward the gym bag she was clutching. "Robert told you to bring your personal belongings. I want to see them." She hesitantly placed the bag on the floor and opened it. Inside, neatly folded, was a thick, clean blanket and a pair of brand new, white wool socks. "You actually brought them," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. "I promised," she whispered. I reached down, picked up the socks, and placed them next to the sandwich and the note. "Sarah," I said, looking her straight in the eyes, "you don't need these anymore. You won't be sleeping on couches, and you won't be worrying about the cold. I extended my hand. Welcome to the corporate team, Director Miller. Now, let's go downstairs. I want you to tell Thomas the doorman that you just got a promotion. She took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong, still slightly damp with nervous sweat. But why did you make me bring my things? She asked, her voice still shaky. I smiled, a wide, genuine smile that reached my eyes. Because I wanted to make sure you didn't have to carry them back to your locker. You're not going back to the front desk, Sarah. You're going home. The final shock was yet to come, and it wasn't for Sarah. It was for Robert, the general manager, and the rest of the staff who had watched the nervous receptionist disappear into the executive office. I knew what they were expecting. They were expecting a firing. They were expecting the cold, corporate hammer to fall. I wanted them to see the truth. I wanted them to see what happens when you lead with heart. I walked Sarah, still slightly shell-shocked but radiating newfound hope, out of the office. We went straight to the employee garage. The new car was there, shining under the fluorescent lights. But that wasn't the main event. The main event was going back through the lobby. We walked out of the elevator and stepped onto the gleaming marble floor. Sarah was still clinging slightly to my arm, almost as if she needed to make sure I was real. Robert, who had been hovering near the front desk, rushed over, his face a mask of concern. Ms. Vance, is everything all right? What was the outcome? I stopped in the middle of the lobby, pulling Sarah slightly forward. All the guests, all the staff, including Thomas, the doorman, were watching us. Robert, I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the vast lobby. I want you to be the first to congratulate Director Sarah Miller. She has been promoted to lead our corporate training division, effective immediately. The silence was deafening. Robert's jaw dropped. The young man at the front desk stopped keying in data. Thomas, standing rigidly by the door, looked like he might actually faint. I looked down at Sarah, whose eyes were shining. Tell them, Director Miller. Tell them what you did that earned you this. Sarah took a deep breath, standing tall in her pristine uniform, no longer the nervous receptionist, but the company's new moral compass. I gave a cold, hungry person my sandwich, she said, her voice clear and steady. And I offered her my blanket. I looked around the room, making sure every eye was on us. That, I declared, my voice ringing with pride, is the Lexington Grand Standard. And from now on, that is the only standard we will accept. The tension broke. A few of the guests who had been watching the drama unfold actually started applauding. Robert, ever the professional, recovered quickly and rushed to shake Sarah's hand, stammering his congratulations. Thomas gave her a massive, genuine smile from his post by the revolving door. As for me, I knew the test was over. The Empire was safe. I had found the heart I feared was lost, and I was going to make sure it beat loud enough for the whole world to hear. But the story wasn't quite done. I had one final, small, personal thing I needed to do before Sarah officially started her new life. And that was going to be the most satisfying part of all. I didn't let Sarah stand in the lobby for
long.
The cheers and the shocked murmurs of the staff were great for morale, but the poor kid looked like she was about to pass out. I gently guided her away from the commotion. Mike is downstairs handling the logistics of your new car. Director Miller, I said, putting a friendly, firm hand on her elbow. But I'm taking you home tonight. I want to see you settled in your new place. She was still in a daze. Ms. Vance, I don't know what to say. I feel like I'm dreaming. I need to pinch myself. Don't worry, I chuckled. It's very real. And you earned every bit of it. Now, come on. We slipped out the back entrance and went straight to where Mike had the new car waiting, a sleek, dark gray hybrid sedan. It was sensible, safe, and brand new. Mike handed me the keys and the registration, giving Sarah a knowing smile. He knew he was witnessing history. "Mike, you can head home," I told him. "I'll handle the rest." I insisted on driving. Sarah, still clutching her old canvas bag containing the socks and blanket, sat in the passenger seat, completely silent for the first few minutes as we pulled out into the Chicago traffic. "I need you to talk to me, Sarah," I finally said, glancing over. "Tell me what's going through your head." She took a huge, shuddering breath. "I keep thinking about the sandwich, Ms. Vance. I keep thinking I almost got fired for a turkey and Swiss." I laughed, a warm, genuine laugh that felt good after the stiffness of the last 24 hours. "You almost got fired for following your heart, Sarah. And that is exactly why you are now running our training program. We need people who are willing to risk their jobs for the right thing." "But why the test, Ms. Vance? Why the disguise?" I pulled up to a stoplight, the city lights reflecting off the hood of the new car. Because I needed to know if the heart of the Lexington Grand was still beating. I needed to see how we treated the people who couldn't help us. The people who couldn't afford our rooms. That's the real measure of a company, Sarah. How you treat the invisible. I told her a shortened version of my own story. The sleeping in the car, the cold, the feeling of being invisible. "You reminded me of myself," I finished simply. "And I realized that if I let you go because you were kind, then I was betraying everything I built the company on." She nodded slowly, processing it all. "I only offered the blanket because I remembered what it was like," she whispered. "When I first moved here before I got the job, I felt so alone. I just wanted her to know that someone saw her." "You did better than that, Sarah. You saved the company's soul." We pulled up in front of the small, clean apartment building Mike had secured. It was safe, quiet, and thankfully close to the hotel and the university. I parked the car, and we walked up to her new front door. Mike had already arranged for the utilities to be on, and the place was simple but spotless. Sarah stepped inside, looking around the small living room with wide, disbelieving eyes. It's beautiful, Ms. Vance. I can't believe this is mine." "It's yours for the next 6 months, Sarah, and then we'll talk about buying your own place. No more shared living. No more sleeping on couches." She turned to me, tears streaming freely now. "How can I ever repay you?" I shook my head firmly. "You already did. You repaid me last night with a sandwich and a note. And you'll repay me by teaching everyone who works for me how to be human." I reached into my designer handbag and pulled out the small, white plastic bag. I took out the sandwich, still wrapped, and the folded napkin. "This is the final thing," I said, placing both items carefully on the counter of her new, tiny kitchen. I didn't eat the sandwich. I couldn't. It became too valuable. "It is your artifact now. It is proof that a single act of kindness, done when no one is watching, is more powerful than any corporate strategy." I smoothed out the napkin with her handwriting. "And this note? This is your new employee handbook. This is what you teach." I looked at her, truly seeing the transformation in her eyes, not just the relief, but the sudden, fierce confidence of someone who knows their worth. "Keep them, Sarah," I said. "And whenever you start to feel overwhelmed by the corporate world, whenever you feel like you might lose your way, look at this note and remember the person you were last night. That person is the most valuable asset we have." She walked over to the counter and gently touched the sandwich bag and the napkin. "I won't forget," she promised, her voice thick with emotion. "Never." We talked for a few more minutes about her start date and the logistics of her scholarship. But then I knew it was time to leave her alone, to let her absorb the miracle that had just happened. As I walked out the door, I paused. "Director Miller," I said. She turned, already looking more comfortable in her new space. "Please call me Avery," I corrected her. "And Sarah, I need you to do one thing for me right now." "Anything, as Avery. I know you just got promoted and got a new car," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "But you had a very long night, and you have a very big job starting Monday. So, your first official corporate directive from the CEO is this: go to bed. Sleep for 12 hours. And for the first time in a very long time, don't set an alarm." A genuine, wide smile broke across her face. "Yes, Avery." Directive accepted. I closed the door gently behind me. Walking back to the car, the cold air felt different. It wasn't biting or judgmental. It was just the crisp air of a Chicago night. I climbed back into the driver's seat and sat for a moment, letting the silence settle. The memory of the dirty coat and the cold streets was still sharp, but now it was balanced by the warmth of Sarah's simple gesture. I realized then that the test hadn't just been for the company. It had been for me. I had been so high up in my penthouse, surrounded by success and wealth, that I had started to forget the grit and the struggle that built it all. Sarah brought me back down to earth. She reminded me that the real luxury isn't marble floors or crystal chandeliers. It's the security of knowing you have a warm place to sleep and a meal to eat. My empire was built on that simple truth. And thanks to Sarah Miller, the heart of the Lexington Grand was beating stronger than ever. I put the car in drive, heading back toward the glow of the city lights, ready to teach the world what true five-star service really meant. It wasn't about the thread count of the sheets. It was about the warmth of the soul behind the front desk. And I had just hired the best teacher in the world.